In the last section, we talked about appeals and arguments. Now let's really delve into arguments, because that is the primary persuasive method that we utilize when we're trying to change someone's mind or modify their purchasing. This is where it comes in, is the argument. Speaking with a passion born of your own authentic experience and belief is always persuasive. That's what I really try to get you to do within this class, is to look at are you passionate about? What makes you excited? Because that excitement will come out in your presentation, in your speech. You're going to be much more persuasive if you care about the topic than if you don't care about it. We're going to talk about what an argument is, informal logic, contemporary arguments, fallacies, organizing persuasive speech, and we'll break from the book again towards the end. What is an argument? An argument is a claim or series of claims supported by evidence and reasoning. Reasoning refers to the ability to make an inference or judgment based on evidence. Logic is oftentimes what we call that process, and is the structure of reasoning. What this is really saying is that in order for us to persuade someone, what we're saying needs to make sense. It needs to connect the dots for them so they can see when they arrive at that decision how they got there and why they got there. We talked a little bit about the big question: is all of our communication persuasive? I have a hard time saying yes just because it doesn't feel right, but at the same time, it's really difficult to say no, because I can't think of a time that we do engage with the conversation. We're not trying to persuade someone in some aspect or change some belief, to change their attitude, to change their opinion, to improve their opinion of us. It could be anything from, hey, I'm going to listen to you, we're going to hang out because I want you to feel closer to me, I want you to feel valued. Oh, that's persuasion. Or, yeah, we're just talking about where we're going to dinner, but I really don't want to eat what you're wanting. Instead, I want to go to this taco because it's Tuesday and Tuesday tacos. And so that becomes persuasive. Even when we're just bonding, in many ways, we're trying to improve the person's opinion of us. That's persuasion. So it's difficult to say where persuasion ends and just regular conversation begins. It's an interesting thought. Let's take a look more at arguments. What is an argument? Is the current course you're taking informative, persuasive, or both? I'm going with it's both. I'm giving you a lot of information, but I'm trying to persuade how you look at communication and how you communicate in the future and how you do public speaking. Now, in ancient times, there used to be a group of individuals called the sophists, and they were people trained in argument. And that was their thing. They went around and gave their services or sold their services to persuade groups, to persuade government, and they just traveled around, and that was their lifestyle. So the sophists kind of still live today in many of our modern professions. Anything from marketing to lawyers, they're all kind of a branch of those original sophists. Understanding logic. Logic is a very impactful aspect of how we change someone's mind, how we persuade them. It's the logos in the Aristotelian triangle. And so it's absolutely something that's important to us. So we need to understand how logic works for us. We have several ones that we want to look at. The syllogism is an argument that consists of a minor premise that we can draw out from those to make it connect. Humans are mortal, you're human, thus you're mortal. So this is a logical flow that we're giving our audience without necessarily saying you're mortal. Well, okay, why? Well, okay, we'll connect these dots for you, and thus you'll arrive at it in a much easier way. That is a logical presentation. We have deductive and inductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning is kind of along the lines of what we just looked at, where we're taking a larger concept and we're drawing it down. So once again, hey, you are a hockey fan. So you must like the Avalanche because the Avalanche won the Stanley Cup. See kind of how we went from larger premises and drew it down. We could even gone with sports fan, hockey fan, down to Avalanche fan. Or you are an Avalanche fan, so you must like hockey, so you must like sports. So that's kind of your inductive and deductive reasoning. One is narrowing it, one's expanding it back out. An enthymeme is an argument that you don't have to state the premise. All right, so you could go with an example of kind of what we've been talking about where Bob lied so he can't be trusted. I don't need to support it with a lot of evidence and a lot of things along the way, just that initial aspect of it, and then we can draw them towards the conclusion without each stop in between. Persuasion relies on the audience being able to make this journey without us stopping in each way. Well, if he lied, then that means he's a liar, and he has lied more than once, and so that means, and then it goes from there. So in the contemporary arguments, oftentimes we use this where, okay, we need to have our audience analysis, we need to understand what our audience believes, some of their values, some of their beliefs, maybe even their attitudes, so that way we can say, okay, their attitude is this. So I can use this to help get them to what I want to persuade them or to look at. We use claims along the way in order to connect the things. They can be a claim of fact. It can be a claim of value, or it can be a claim of policy. Since the Avs did just win the Stanley Cup, let's go ahead and just borrow them once again. When we look at this, a claim of fact, Avs won the Stanley Cup. So they're a good hockey team. And that means they value teamwork. And through teamwork, they're able to achieve success. And they do this through the policy of encouraging or paying players more money. And so you can see how all three of these kind of interlink into coming to the argument of why they're a good hockey team. You can use evidence to support that claim, which is absolutely what we've been talking about. The evidence can be a case of they achieved this. This is the goal. This is what they have done. They experienced this. Absolutely tie it into evidence that your audience will understand and connect with. The reasoning of warrant, the connection between a claim and evidence. And you want to absolutely make your audience the center of it, because if they're there listening to your speech, they're there for a reason. And so what you want to do is have evidence that supports something they believe in that can lead to the claim. This is a simple connection that will help be more persuasive for your audience. Fallacies. Now, as we're talking about claims and evidence and logos, fallacies are a logical failure. There's something that might feel right and might, oh yeah, this makes sense. I'm gonna put this in my speech. This, once again, is the reason why we have a system for building speeches, why we absolutely always start off with that draft and then that full sentence outline. Because with that full sentence outline, you can read through it, you can have other people read through it, and you can spot fallacies easier than you can when you just present it or draw information from, oh, well, I know this general topic, so I'll talk about it. Instead, what you want to be able to do is have that full sentence outline so you can identify fallacies that you may be including. This is also why that full sentence outline keeps you from being unethical, because you can throw a fallacy in without realizing it, and if you're just speaking off the cuff, that's what sneaks in. The ad hominem is not a fair attack where you're attacking the person versus the actual argument. Going back to Bob and how he lied and he can't thus be trusted, well, that may not have anything to do with his job. It may not have anything to do with the study that he did. Was the lie a social one and thus had nothing to do with his career? Was it something that was detached? Oh, he's talking to you about saving money, but yet he went out and bought a sports car, or he went out and bought a large house. How can this person talk to you about it? Well, that has nothing to do with saving money. It's how he spent his money, but he can still talk to you about how to save money. Ad populum. In other words, if it's popular, you appeal to it, but it may not be correct. Matter of fact, if you go back 100 years, popular beliefs back then don't hold up today. There was one time when on television they would promote cigarettes, take a fresh breath. They're healthy for you. That was because at the time they really kind of believed that. But as facts and evidence came in and we learned about the connection to cancer, we saw that yes, popular feeling was not associated with the truth. Bandwagon fallacy. Everyone's doing this, you need to do this. We see this oftentimes with pop culture where something comes up and it sounds like a great idea. Everyone's doing it, so we'll jump on the bandwagon, only to discover that really it's not a good idea. A false dilemma. You're either with us or you're against us. There's no in between. No, there's always an in between. The world operates in different stages of gray, basically. So absolutely, if someone tells you it's either or, it's probably not either or, and it's a fallacy that they're trying to trick you into being persuaded. Non sequitur fallacy, where one thing doesn't follow the other. If we go back to Bob lied, well, so Bob lied, so he can't be trusted, so he's going to have heart disease. No, that didn't follow. It didn't make sense. One has nothing to do with the other one. A red herring is they put up a false thing that they want you to pay attention to, and that way you don't pay attention to what actually is going on. They love this in mystery books. Oh, I know who did it. I know absolutely they're the guilty person. You get to the end and it's like, oh, that was a red herring. They weren't the person. It was this other person. Slippery slope. Well, if you do this, this will happen. This is oftentimes a social argument. Well, if we let this happen, then before you know it, the world ends, or something drastic and terrible. One thing always leads to another. No, that is a slippery slope, and it's a common one, so watch out for those. Straw person fallacy. They build up the appearance of their person so that they can attack it, and it's really just a straw person. It's almost a red herring. It's kind of a distraction. There's additional one that oftentimes we see now, and it's a fallacy of assertion, where if they assert something enough times, you believe it. And the crazier it is, and the more times they assert it, the more likely you are to believe it. This is perhaps how that whole flat earth aspect suddenly came back in when we know the world is not flat. So yeah, they just assert it enough times. That doesn't make it true. That becomes a fallacy. As you're organizing your speech, I do talk about going back to that audience analysis, because there is that latitude of acceptance. And if you want to change someone's belief or their values on something, if something's good or bad, you have to realize how far do you have to move them. If you have to move them a long distance, you need to make stops in between and slowly move them over when persuading them, rather than try to get them to suddenly completely switch their mind, because that's very difficult to do. So you want to have that latitude of acceptance, that examination of your audience to understand where they're starting, so that way you can help them through logic, through evidence, to lead them to a different outcome. So absolutely, you have to consider what their values are and where they're coming from before you can know how far you can persuade them or where you can take them. That's kind of like if you're a salesperson, you got to know how much your audience can afford before you try selling them the top end where there's no way they can afford it. So you absolutely need to understand their values and how far you have to move them. This is Monroe's motivated sequence. This is something I absolutely believe you should be utilizing in your persuasive speech, because it gives you a very good step-by-step process to persuade someone. And it is used in all the commercials you see, in the social movements you see, in the charities, all of these. The first thing they want to do is get your attention. How they get your attention? Through that attention getter, but also by connecting with you. Because people like people who like them and who are like them. And for that reason, part of your attention is often something that connects with the audience. This is why you'll hear salesmen say, you have a good looking family there. You know, you're a real nice person. I really like you. All those are attention getters, but they're focused on the audience. They're not just focused on, here's the best car you can buy, or here's the best TV. No, it starts off with that attention getter, getting that bond going. Then you create a need or a problem, such as with the car salesman. You know, you're a great person. I really like you. And I think you're a very adventurous person. Your car doesn't say that. Your car really is not expressing who you are, and it doesn't give you the freedom you need. Aha! Got your attention? Now they've moved on to a need. You need a new car. And then they offer the solution or satisfaction. But you know, right over here on the lot, I got this wonderful car that's you. It is so much like you. You're going to enjoy it. It's going to be great. This is the solution for your car problem. Boom. Attention, need, satisfaction, solution. Following right along. Visualize yourself driving through the Rocky Mountains in this on a nice summer day or a nice fall day with the aspens turning, and the enjoyment that you're going to have with your friends and family while you're in this wonderful car that gives you the view of the changing of the aspens. Suddenly, yeah, wow, you've gone from they like you, your car isn't for you, we got this great car, now you're doing these wonderful things because you have taken this and you've purchased this car. And then the action, which is now that you can see yourself in this car, let's sit down and get the paperwork so you can purchase this car. Boom. I think every one of us has experienced that. We have experienced it with home buying, we have experienced it with cars, we have experienced it even with the groceries that we buy. You know, you see a soda commercial, they always start off with, hey, look at the fun and exciting world that we live in. You have no energy. Buy our drink, you'll have energy. So you can see how, yes, a lot of those come from Monroe's Motivated Sequence. This is a formula that I want to see within your speeches. All right, organizing the persuasive speech. Now, if it might be refuted, if you might have an argument against it, sometimes that's a good idea to address those, because then your audience doesn't feel you're trying to trick them or that you're leaving something out to be persuasive. You're not falling on fallacies, but you're actually addressing it. So at some point you bring out, yes, I know this car, it has everything you want, but its miles per gallon isn't as good as other cars. And then they can go into it. And this will draw in aspects of it where you'll have claims of the other position. You can contrast the two. Yes, but the miles per gallon is only 3 less than its nearest competitor. Something of that variety. And you can start working in aspects that might be refuted so that way your argument is more persuasive. You might also organize your speech to include a competitive advantage. This is something that you hear, and it's kind of drawing upon the ethos, the credibility of a product. And you have a problem, and then you might say, our company has worked for decades to address this problem and overcome it. And we're doing better than the competition or the competitor. And you can describe how they're doing that and how it ends up being better. It could be a policy, you know. Yes, we realize the need for the environment. So for every tree that we cut down, we plant 10 trees. And we've done this for the last 10 years. And this means we've planted X number of acres of trees. So you're suddenly seeing, and our competitors haven't. Suddenly you're talking about advantages you have through your persuasion versus the other. This is something you absolutely can work into your persuasive speech. At times, even the best argument doesn't always win, because there's a lot of psychology involved in persuasion. Heuristics, there is body language, there's expectations. All of these are required to actually be persuasive. So you might write the best speech, you may have the strongest arguments, but you don't connect to your audience. That's the reason why I do absolutely share TED Talks, such as Mark Bowden's The Evolutionary Psychologist. I like sharing his because he actually addresses some of these with body language, and why I absolutely don't want you sitting in front of your computer talking to the audience like this with absolutely nothing, or perhaps just reading the script as you're going through your speech. That's not going to be persuasive, because you're not connecting the message with the energy and with the body language that is required in persuasion. Because you are looking at an audience that's going to view one of three ways. Either they're going to think of you positively, in which case it's easy to connect with them. If you come out and you look the role, you've done your audience analysis, you understand, you're opening up your body language, you're using gestures, you have a non-threatening look to you, and they like you, guess what? You're going to be very persuasive, because your audience already feels a bond for you. Even if you make a mistake, they're going to correct it for you mentally, or they're going to give you extra room to make that mistake. So if you have that positive impression, it's important. That's why you dress the role. That's why you do the body language. That's why you vary your speech patterns. That's why you use the pause to draw in their attention. Next, if you come out and you don't look the role, your body language is off, you look upset, you're talking quick, and your voice is not coming across well, your audience perceives you as a threat. And as a threat, that means you're not going to be very persuasive. Matter of fact, keeping them engaged is going to be difficult because they don't like you. They want to get away from you. You're threatening to them. So as a threat, avoid that, especially early in the speech. Well, avoid it overall, but early in the speech, those threat signals really turn your audience off. Now, the next one is indifference. This is a majority of them. They're a little bit indifferent towards your persuasive speech. They're a little bit indifferent towards you. What you want to be able to do is change that indifference towards positive. All right. So if you think of it as a scale, threat is down here, indifference here, positives here. Your goal, though, to be persuasive is up here. So it's a short climb if you come off and it's a positive one. A little bit steeper when it is a indifferent one, and it's a large climb if it comes off has a threat towards them. And finally, if your audience is romantically attracted towards you, it's really easy. I guess romance is maybe too much of a term, because yeah, I can persuade my wife pretty easily. But there's also a kindred aspect of it where I can persuade family members much easier than I can a stranger. So as long as there's that, yeah, don't ever rely on that with your audience, unless your audience is one, your significant other, and then in which case you can rely on it more frequently. How to impress early. This is important because, as I mentioned, they're going to put you in one of those categories when you walk out there, when you step in front of the group, when you're trying to engage them. So you want to look the role. And I'm not talking about the roles that we may have laid out in the 1960s and 70s and so forth. No, what we want to do is come across fitting the image that our audience expects. Do they expect you to come out in a business suit with a tie and a jacket? Okay, then do so, because automatically you're starting out with indifferent, and you may even rise up to positive. Now, of course, that can be perceived differently based on your audience. We're here in Colorado. We have kind of that Western culture going on. If I showed up in a tuxedo to talk to farmers, I'm a threat. I'm not being received positively. So when you're looking the part, look the part that your audience expects. And that's so you start off with that positive impression that gives you some leniency and some room in order to be persuasive. Of course, if I go talk to the farmers, I have this shirt on, I have blue jeans on, I have cowboy boots on. They're going to accept me. So think about it. Non-threatening body language. Yeah, you absolutely want to have non-threatening body language. You want to keep open. Vulnerability is actually the aspect that you're kind of looking for. Openness. You don't want to look like you're about ready to fight with them or you're about to run away. You want to look like, okay, I'm here to talk to you and I'm going to do it genuinely and I'm going to engage with you. That's the type of body language. If you want to learn the proper body language, just take a moment when you're talking to friends or family and see what your body language looks like. That's probably that conversational body language that you want with an audience. Facial expression and gestures. Yeah, we want to see facial expressions. I know it's difficult to tell someone to smile. In the proper situation, that is appropriate. And people perceive a smile as a gesture of goodwill. And that's why smiling is actually encouraged. You'll see sales companies put a mirror above the telephone before someone answers the phone, and on that mirror it says smile. So they can look at the mirror and say, oh, yeah, okay. And that even changes their voice and how they interact with that person when they picked up the phone. Be organized. Know where you're going. Have things laid out. Nothing worse than you start talking and wandering off. So be organized, have a clear and strong voice, use pauses, vary your tone, vary the rhythm, make it appropriate. That's why I tell a lot of students when they start off, don't start off like it's a sprint. Because they'll come out, they'll do their speech, and this is how they do their speech. Their speech is delivered really fast, and they want to make sure they get to all their points, so they go really, really fast. And that creates anxiety in your audience. You're like, oh. So if you start off with a good rhythm, a good pace, then your audience will connect with you. And you can speed it up when you're talking about something exciting. This was such a great thing. Yes, speed it up then, but also change it. Overcoming indifference. This is huge. And one of the best ways to do this is storytelling. Because oftentimes when we try to connect with people and through arguments, we just keep throwing facts at them. We throw data at them and we overwhelm them and they don't feel connected. They're not seeing things from our perspective. They just feel like, well, I'm going to go find my own evidence to argue your evidence. No, instead what you want to do is invite them to see it from your view. Invite them in so that way you're showing a little bit of vulnerability, but you're sharing an aspect of yourself that they can experience too. Such as if I want to change perhaps the amount of miles we're driving per week. Instead of getting out on the highway, all of us, maybe I want to promote public transportation. So I'd say, I used to drive every day, and when I drove, I would get upset. I would get mad at the other drivers. And then I started taking the bus. And on my first day on the bus, I sat down to this person and they told me a story. And in that story, I really began to connect with this and I became a good friend of this person. Something I would have never experienced in my car by myself. But on public transportation, I did. Suddenly, we're seeing a benefit of public transportation that we may not have seen otherwise. Today we talked about what is an argument, informal logic, contemporary arguments, fallacies, organizing that persuasive speech, and we broke from the book a little bit to explore different topics. All of these will absolutely be impactful as you sit down and you follow those steps. You do that rough outline, you do the full sentence outline, and you put together the speaking outline. As you follow these with the audience analysis and looking the part and practicing your body language, you'll find that you're much more persuasive than just the words on the page, but in your delivery.